Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Legacy Running Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah, and today I'm really excited to bring Lisa on. Lisa, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Yes, thanks so much for being here. I got to be on your podcast a couple weeks ago, or really just last week we did our interview. And it was so fun to just learn from you, chat with you. And I was like, okay, we need to bring her on the Legacy Running podcast because you have so much to give to my audience. But before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you live, all the things?
For sure. Yeah. So I'm the owner and head coach at Nutrition Coaching and Life. I have a master's in exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition. And I have been working online with people all over the globe full time for about 7 years now. I'm currently located in South America. So I take full advantage of the fact that I can work remotely and have been all over the globe. But for the last year, I have been located or based in Bolivia, so South America, which works out so well in terms of time zones with most of my clients who are in the US or in Canada as well.
So cool. I love that. That's amazing. I'm curious because I know like you're kind of niche in the audience that you work with, but I'm curious like how has that evolved over time? Like when you first started your practice, were you like, I will see anybody? And then like over time it's kind of like narrowed down to women.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do work with men as well. 10 to 20% of our clients are probably male. But generally speaking, and I'm sure you kind of feel the same way, you end up attracting sort of who you were maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or in the past. So what I was struggling with is the person that I'm attracting now as well. At least I feel that way. And of course, as we talked about before we hit record, many of my clients are actually older than me, so they're probably between 35 and 55 type of thing. But I mean more like from a mental aspect or also from a what they're passionate about, their type A personality, perhaps, all the various diets that they have put themselves through, and they're just struggling and often feeling like, why don't I look like I work out, or why don't I feel better in my body, even though I'm trying to eat so well, and I'm putting in so much work. And that I think is kind of the personality or the persona that I used to be in the past as well. So now I just want to help as many people as possible that have the same sort of journey as I have gone through. And yeah, I think we always kind of track that then at the same time.
Totally. It's so crazy how like your story can really become like your superpower. Like people just kind of like uh maybe see themselves in you or like
Yes,
relate to you. And it's just funny how
that's
that kind
it.
of works out. I'm curious how, like in what specific ways are you kind of helping and serving women and men, like just your clientele?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, to give a little bit more context, I guess, uh, I did not just study nutrition, and now that's why I want to help people. Like I was saying, I love being social. I love traveling. I love trying different foods and so on. And so I always felt like I either had to pick a fun life or the body that I want to have.
Mm,
Like athletic looking, feeling good, and so on. And because it was always like, okay, it felt like one was contradicting the other.
mm,
And I, because of that, thought I had to put myself through very restrictive things like um, paleo diet, low carb, high carb, like whatever it is, you name it, I've probably done it. And at some point, like I vividly remember standing in a food court in Thailand on one of my journeys, and I had just done a really hard CrossFit workout because at that time I was doing CrossFit, and finished the workout, wanted to get some food because of course you're starving after a hard workout, and I looked around and I started crying because I felt like I couldn't have any of the food that was there. One thing was with rice, so of course I couldn't have those kind of carbs. The other thing was deep fried, so of course I couldn't have that. The next thing was with sugar, and I was just like, this cannot be it. This cannot be the reason. Like, I'm not here on this earth to feel so restricted through food. And I honestly, like, within me, there was something that told me that food is here to like enrich my life and not to make it worse and not to be this demon in my head that I constantly think about. And so I'd kind of gone on a bit of a quest, and thankfully I stumbled upon it was actually a blog article written by a CrossFitter at the time that I was looking up to, and the blog article was titled "How Donuts Gave Me Abs and an 80 kg Snatch." And so, for those of you listening who are not familiar with Olympic lifting, like a snatch is a really heavy lift, and I was like, I want all three of these things. I want to have abs, I want to have a donut, and I want to be able to lift heavy shit. And so I read the article, and in this article, she was basically saying that she also was eating like super clean, paleo, and somehow her performance actually went kind of downhill. And then her coach at one point just said to her, I think we need to include more carbs. What are you actually eating? So they assessed what she was eating and switched her into what I now call flexible dieting approach. So basically just teaching her how many calories, how much energy her body actually needs, and what percentage of that energy should be carbs, proteins, and fats. But within that budget, you can technically eat whatever you want. Sure, you should still eat, 80, 90% whole foods, good quality foods, but there's also nothing wrong with having a brownie from time to time, or it doesn't actually matter whether you are eating, a small bowl of cereal or whether that's a potato and something like carbs are kind of carbs, as long as we're hitting fiber and protein and all these things with it. When I read that, I was like, whoa, this sounds too good to be true. But I was so desperate, I was willing to give it a go. And I have a very logical mind, so it actually sort of sounded like it made sense. It gave me some really tangible guidelines of, and this is your calorie target. You can fit into this budget whatever you want, just like with a financial budget, if you've covered all your expenses, you can then also spoil yourself a little bit and buy that nice hoodie that you've been wanting or go on a trip or something like that. So I gave it a try, and I felt, honestly, I'm not even joking, I felt better within 4 weeks. Like my performance was improving. I felt like I was finally showing some definition, and more than anything, I felt like food freedom. I felt like food could be fun. I felt like I can go out. I can, like just have a bit more variety other than just quote unquote eating clean. And so when that happened, I decided to make that my mission, to teach other people that food should enrich your life, should something that you actually enjoy playing with and incorporating in your life in a good way. And so from there, I would say like I have worked with people, 65, people with age 19, male, female, it doesn't matter. But the majority of the people are already pretty active when they come to me. They have, like I mentioned, gone through various diets too. And oftentimes they don't even want to lose like a ton of weight. They just want to look defined. They want to maybe lose a little bit that ring around the belly or so, especially if we're starting to have like menobelly or something like that, throughout the menopause transition. So I would say, yeah, generally speaking, to answer your question, who am I working with? Someone who's usually already active, actually likes working out, actually likes thinking about nutrition or putting the work into having a healthy body, but is really confused with all the things that are being thrown around on social media. And yeah, I guess kind of learning to or teaching this person that often it just comes down to stripping things back and really learning about your own personal calorie requirements as opposed to just following some dogmatic approach to nutrition.
Wow, that's such a powerful story. That's like really, I don't know, it's just awesome to see like where you've come from and that it's not from a place of like, okay, like I needed to be perfect, therefore now I'm like perfect. It's like I needed to actually be more free and like you found
That's
that
it.
and
Yeah, that's very
serve
well said.
that to other people. It's so cool. I'm curious for nutrition, fueling, all of that. What do you feel like are some of the biggest barriers that you see with your clients? Like is it the overload of information? Is it lack of time? Like what are like the biggest things that you're like actually working through with them?
That's a really great question. And I think, like, regardless of whether it's a person who is quote unquote just lifting in the gym or whether it's someone who might be more like your audience, like runners or someone even who's sedentary. Um, I think, yeah, confusion and information overload. And at the same time, or I think if I really had to pinpoint it, it's that we don't like focusing on the basic, boring foundations and we want to have like something special. This is the latest diet, like the carnivore thing, or then you have your vegan thing. And it appears at first simpler to cut something out completely because it gives you a bit more of a rigid guideline and might make decision making in the moment easier, or so it seems anyway. But we neglect to realize that by doing so, we're like, again, like restricting ourselves in the long run. And so then when this person who's just decided to go on a keto diet or carnivore diet or whatever it might be, and then you go to a birthday party and then someone comes out with the cake, you're like, oh, fuck it, whatever, today's, an exception, I'll get back to it tomorrow. And here we have the start of a really bad all or nothing mindset that expands into, okay, the next time this happens on a weekend, so then you allow your whole weekend to be off, and I'll start back up on Monday. And then this happens when you go on vacation. Oh, I'll start back up after my vacation. And then we start developing this. This is good. This is bad. And it really is not a healthy attitude to have towards food, in my opinion. Nothing is good or bad. Some things just have higher caloric value than others. Some things are more micronutrient dense than others. And as long as we learn how to navigate those and build those in the right measures, and we really don't need to attribute that moral value to them. So unfortunately, we don't like hearing, okay, we should start off by including more protein. Are you actually eating enough protein? Oh, I don't want to weigh out my food. This is too tedious. Like, I think often the barrier that I hear to my method, which usually includes just when we start off with the nutrition journey, to weigh out our food and to enter it into a food tracking app. The barrier that I hear most often is just, oh, I don't want to spend that extra time weighing out my food and entering in the app. But when I then say, okay, number one, yes, I understand it's an extra time commitment, but it will get quicker. You'll get faster at this after a couple of weeks. And what's actually 10 minutes out of your day if you compare it to the food freedom that you're getting from it, and the body that you're getting from it, and the good feeling that you're getting from it. Is that worth the investment? I personally would say yes, obviously, because what's 10 minutes? We often scrolled for 10 minutes and you're like, I didn't even know what I was doing these last 10 minutes, right? Um, so that's one thing. And also, my goal for anybody, but especially for my clients, is that when they learn something about nutrition, this knowledge lasts you a lifetime. So let's say if you're getting pregnant in 2 years' time, you then afterwards know how to reduce that weight again in a healthy way postpartum, or even throughout your pregnancy, what is the most healthy way? Where should my calories be throughout this? Or then later on, you might want to go through a muscle building phase. What do I do with my calories then? How much more should I actually eat? And then later on, you might say, oh, I want to lean out a little bit more for my summer vacation. So I want that person, once they have worked with me or learned about this, to be able to navigate their nutrition long term on their own. And for me, from my personal experience and from my coaching approach, um, tracking your food for a little while is honestly the best method. That's kind of like someone saying, I want to save money. How do I do that? Almost any financial advisor will tell you, well, where are your expenses going right now? How much are you making? If you're refusing to look at that, you're not going to be able to save up money because you have no idea how much is going in or how much is going out and where it's going. Same thing applies to nutrition. Once you learn, okay, how much am I actually eating? Because you might be eating 3,000 calories when your actual calorie requirements are 2,000. You might also only be eating 1,500, way under eating. So where are we actually at? What kind of, where are you going, quote unquote, wrong? And aside from that, so I'll tell you, Sarah, with my quote unquote lean eating or clean eating approach, I just thought, okay, as long as it's healthy, I can have as much of it as I want. So, for example, in my breakfast, I'd have like 3 eggs and salmon and some seeds on top, and then some sweet potatoes with it. And I thought, well, this is healthy, you know. And with the first time I tracked my food, and with that I had like bulletproof coffee, which I don't know if the listeners know what that is, but it's like basically you put cream or coconut oil or something like that in there, so some additional fats. First time I tracked my breakfast, my eyes almost fell out of their socket because I was like, shit, this is a 900-calorie breakfast. I thought this is, something light in the morning. So just realizing like, okay, just because something is healthy doesn't necessarily mean it's supportive of your goals. If we're looking at nut butters, at olive oil, avocado, all these things, amazing, but we still want to moderate the quantities. And at the same time, I also learned I don't need to be afraid of that piece of sourdough bread just because it's a piece of sourdough bread. It actually has less calories than maybe the handful of nuts I was considering as the alternative, right? So it is very, very educational once you log and track your food for a few weeks and you actually realize, okay, this is how big my portions should be. This is what's conducive of my goals. And what I often see across the board in terms of when people are starting off, irrespective of the calorie limit is or level, is that almost everybody, whether athlete or not, is consuming not enough protein. And especially for your runners as well, that could be a huge leverage point to increase their recovery rate. I think runners hear a lot about should I be high carb or should I be fat adapted, blah, 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 that whole discussion. Let's put that on the side. Yes, this is important to talk about, but we also need to hit our protein for your connective tissue, for your muscles. Also, you might not look for hypertrophy or strength gains like some other people in the gym, but still protein is so important for many, many other reasons, for satiation, for cognitive benefits as well, or mental health as well. So really, I can only encourage anybody listening, even if you don't necessarily want to lose weight or want to look more defined or put on muscle, track your food intake for a while, take a look at what your average protein actually is, and then see if it's enough for you and for your goals.
I love that. That's so cool. Yeah, I love the like food tracking approach for a period of time as like a tool. I think that's just true of really anything. Like it's like if you want to get faster, okay, what are your actual paces that you're hitting? If you want to not have hip pain, okay, like what are the actual things that make it sore? If you like just really boiling it down to like the very simple things is I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of like the end all be all of anything that's like worth having. But I'm curious, once your clients kind of go through that like initial tracking phase and they're like, they're like, okay, I'm not hitting enough protein. You guys kind of work on that. Like, what are like some of your long-term strategies for clients that are like, I just don't want to keep tracking. I don't want to keep tracking anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I can really understand that and relate to that. And I think often the ultimate goal should be, intuitive eating, unless you have specific physique goals per se, or if you're like a really high performance athlete. But the great thing with tracking too is, so how I usually transition people out of the tracking approach is, okay, we used to track 7 days of the week. Now in the following week, let's just track 5 days, one of the weekend days and 4 during the week. Okay, cool. You're still maintaining the goal weight that we have reached. And on those other 2 days, you're just kind of eating similarly anyway, right? And then after a while, we transition to like 3 days of tracking and 4 days non-tracking. So just kind of slowly weaning yourself off, making sure that the weight is still sticking. If we have gone through a weight loss phase, because that is, to be honest, that is one of the biggest mistakes that I see. Like people lose weight. On average, people are pretty good at losing weight, but they're terrible at keeping the weight off. So most of the time, we either keep calories too low at the end of a weight loss phase because we're so afraid of increasing the calories again. So then eventually your metabolism becomes adapted, your hormones are taking a hit, your training performance goes down the drain, your sleep is not as good anymore. That is not healthy to just stay at a low calorie level. The other mistake that I see people make, they hit their goal weight and then they just go back to their previous way of eating and try to eat intuitively at this time. And in the first few weeks after a diet, we do not want to do intuitive eating because your body's going to tell you to put the weight back on. Your body didn't actually want you to lose the weight because it's kind of like an insurance policy. So it's actually quite important that after a weight loss phase, we do something which we call a reverse diet. So slowly, progressively, but strategically increasing the food again. So we don't want to go from, let's say, in your weight loss phase, your calorie target might have been 1,500 calories. And maybe your actual maintenance calories is like 2,300 or whatever. So if from one day to the next you just go to 2,300, your body is going to store that again as body fat. And it's very likely that at that time your body is actually sending you signals to eat more than that, again, in order to restore what was lost. So we want to, inch our way up, maybe going from 1,500 to 1,700 for a week or two, and then 17 to 1,900 and so on. So this is called a reverse diet, which is, yeah, again, in my opinion, incredibly crucial in order to keep that weight off. But to go back to your question in terms of what to do or strategies for eating once you don't want to track anymore. Again, the great thing about tracking is we can actually, or our eyeballing skills get so much better. So if, let's say, for 2 months, you have tracked your food, you have weighed your food out, every time you were trying to get 6 ounces of chicken breast, I encourage you to like pick up the chicken breast that you've just cooked and you look at it and you're like, oh, I think this is about 5 ounces. And then you place it on the scale and then the scale might say, oh no, this is actually 4. So the next time, like time and time and time and time again, your eyeballing skills for how big your portion should be is going to improve and you roughly know, okay, usually when I was tracking, I had like about a cupped handful of rice with my lunch. Now that I'm not tracking anymore, I'm just going to aim for roughly a cupped handful because I have weighed it out so and so many times. But yeah, on average, like if someone really, 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 really doesn't want to track at all, there is various like palm sized or whatever, like kind of like portion guides like this. I would caution people just relying on that at first without having tracked because especially if you're an active person, your requirements might vary quite a lot from what is just generically put out there. So generically, people might say, okay, for a female, you should always have a palm-sized portion of protein, of lean protein in your meal. You should always have a cupped handful of some starchy carb and, half the plate in vegetables. That's a great starting point. Like if you're really starting from like a horrible, Western diet with everything processed and you're transitioning to this is going to be better than nothing for sure, because at least you are including more protein. But generally speaking, I would say like rely more on what you have learned from the tracking process in terms of like portion size like this. But yeah, generally speaking, we want to have more vegetables on our plate. We want to have more protein on our plate than probably most people think.
Yeah, I love that. I love that how it can become sustainable over time with like kind of that reverse process of like getting back into kind of your day-to-day life without having to be just stringent with tracking. And yeah, I think even like for my audience listening, I don't know, I think there's like space and time to do this. Like maybe if you're in like acute pain and like this is kind of what you're working on is like dealing with your hip pain and kind of being in the perils of that, probably like not the best time to be like, I need to go into a cut right now. But like, I think maybe as it's something that you're like back to running or back to kind of living your active life, like I think that's a great time to maybe like kind of tap into maybe hitting some of these like physique goals or fueling goals or anything like that. Do you feel like with your clients, there's like a time and a place where you're like, now is like not the time to cut. Like you just like this is not it. Or if you're like I actually think that like having these nutrition guidelines is actually going to help you with maybe some of the, I don't know, symptoms you're feeling from like menopause or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I think track, like in those specific scenarios that you mentioned, tracking still comes in handy, but like you said, not in a cut. So for instance, with that injured person, what I quite often see is that people are so afraid to still eat enough, like to fuel their body because they're like, oh, I'm not moving as much anymore. Well, your body deserves to be nourished, even if you're just laying there. And actually, when you're recovering from injury, and you know that better than I do, your calorie requirements often actually go up because your body needs to build that extra connective tissue, let's say after surgery, or even if it's quote unquote just, a fracture or whatever. And so in those instances, I do still often encourage tracking, but again, not in a deficit, actually more in a surplus or at least at a maintenance level so that we're making sure we are nourishing the body enough. And in that time, we can actually increase protein even more because again, like any protein for the people listening, dietary protein is not just advantageous for building muscle, like literally your whole body, your skin, your tendons, everything is made out of proteins. So you are going to enhance or actually at least support injury recovery by consuming more amino acids, which is what proteins are made of. And of course, you can support that with some supplements as well in a recovery process, or things like omega-3 or glutamine if you really want to, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, the best way nutritionally to support an injury recovery is always with, are we eating enough? And of course, like things like, are we sleeping enough and that stuff, but are we eating enough and are we eating enough protein? Those would be the two main things. And then, of course, are we trying to not have so many inflammatory things and more anti-inflammatory foods, like we talked about on my podcast. But yeah, then there is certainly other times. Let's say if somebody has a high stress load at work and they are really in demand from their family, like there's just a lot going on, maybe going through a divorce or whatever, emotional stress. I'm like, this is not the time to be going through a cut, because it's just going to be an extra stressor for your body, and chances that your body's actually letting go of body fat, or especially that lower belly fat, is very slim if our cortisol, if our stress level is just constantly high. So we're actually going to help your body deal with the stress better if we're eating enough, especially also enough carbs, high quality carbs, of course, so that you can actually sleep and offset some of the stress that you have during the day.
Yeah, yeah, I love that explanation. I honestly was just thinking about this. I had she's a physical therapist and coach, and she really talks about how her with her clients that are mostly kind of in like a chronic pain state and then coming out of this, they oftentimes want to lose weight or want to go into a cut. And she said, she was like, you have to earn your cut. Like she was like, we have to ensure that you're eating enough to start with. We have to ensure that you're out of acute pain. And then really only then can we start thinking of, okay, like where can we pull from for a short period of time, to have hit these physique goals, and then just kind of ensure that you're getting back to like a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's not just like, I do like the way that it's phrased with you have to earn your cut, but I want people to think more like the efficiency of the cut is going to be so much higher if you nourished your body beforehand too. Let's just say somebody who has gone through 10 different diets over the last 3 years, and maybe, oh, out of these 3 years, in total, with like vacation and holidays and so on, where they maybe ate a bit more, all in all, maybe 5 months of those 3 years, they ate at a sufficient calorie level. Their body, if we now go into a strategic weight loss phase, is not going to respond nearly as well as somebody who was eating sufficient throughout these entire 3 years or even several months beforehand. So the more you nourish your body before, the better you are setting yourself up for quicker results in that weight loss phase, because otherwise it's just gonna drag on, and it feels like driving a car with the handbrake on the whole time. So better setting yourself up properly, getting a quick response, a good response with a good metabolism, healthy hormones, a shorter cut that you can then pivot back out of very quickly. So I think I love what she was saying there.
Yeah, yeah, I was like, that's really eye-opening and just really cool. Another like big topic that I see with my clients, especially like just being like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, of just like wanting to strength train. Like I think there's a huge movement of women that are like, oh my gosh, I like am getting my bone density results back. Like I'm like trending towards osteopenia, trending towards osteoporosis. And I don't know, I think strength is just like a really big buzzword right now. Like Pilates is strength and bar is strength and Orange Theory is strength. And I don't know, I'm like very happy that people are moving, but I think there's like a lot of maybe myths around what strength is. What are like the ways that you're like training your clients to actually like really strength train and like get those muscle mass increases and like bone density increases, yeah, with your clients?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is a great thing that that is becoming so widespread amongst the general population as well, and just that the message is getting out there that, hey, especially also women, we need to be strength training because if not, like if we're not sending our body the signals that it needs to keep, at least keep the muscle that we have or even build the muscle that we have, it is going to want to get rid of it. That's just the natural aging process. So strength training, and again, sorry, I'm going to say it one more time. High protein intake is actually also helpful for offsetting muscle loss as we age. So both of these things in combination is like your miracle formula for healthy aging or preventing sarcopenia and osteoporosis as well, actually, on that front. So I, however, do really want to encourage people to start where they are. So if you're currently quote unquote just running or not doing anything and you hear this, oh, I want to lift heavy, the last thing I would recommend is, go into the gym and just do everything as hard as you possibly can. You're probably going to get injured,
Mhm.
and especially if you do it with bad form, like start where you are. Even for like to be honest, when I started strength training, so I before doing CrossFit, I had more of a like running, yoga, swimming type background as well. And then I did become interested in CrossFit, but I was a poor college student, so I didn't want to pay the fee to go to a gym. So literally for an entire year, all I did was like YouTube body weight workouts. And like looking back at it now, it was a great progression because what I learned during this entire year was like how to do a proper lunge or even single leg squat that we talked about in our interview too, or push-ups or plank things. Like I had a really strong core by the time I actually set foot in the gym and lifted some heavy stuff on my body. And I think yeah, nowadays we're almost like too quick to jump into too heavy weights because we're constantly told you need to lift heavy. So I think people should still not be afraid of using bands, of using especially also dumbbells and kettlebells, and just starting with that. That being said, progressive overload is definitely a principle that I always want my clients to at least be aware of like, okay, don't be that person that's been going to the gym for the last 10 years and is using setting number 5 on machine number X all the time because that's just what you've been doing for the same reps. We still want to make sure we're, pushing ourselves near failure or to failure on at least the isolation exercises and maybe a little bit further away from failure on the compounds, but still trying to increase. So making sure we're keeping like a training diary or somewhat of a log book where you're like, okay, last week I was lifting this, maybe I can add an extra rep to at least two of the exercises in my program today, or maybe I can add a little bit more weight here and there. So that progressive overload is still important, but then also learning to recognize when you might be due for a deload week, because that's actually, to be honest, something that I see with my clients quite a lot, that they have been so indoctrinated with like, you need to progressively overload, you need to push yourself, that they're almost afraid of listening to their body when it's screaming for deload or when you are having harder PMS symptoms, or when you're going on vacation, I'm just saying like, hey, it's okay to just, for 1 week, just go for walks. Or if you used to enjoy Zumba classes and you're feeling like really a little bit lethargic this weekend, you don't want to go to the gym, just go to a Zumba class or do some Pilates. Like I think the enjoyment factor really is super, super important still, even if we are like trying to progressively overload.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I couldn't agree more. That's so funny that you said deload. In my Empower Hit program right now, we're in week 7 and the like topic is deload. So all the women
Oh.
have progressed their running volume and their strength training, like at least over the last 6 to 7 weeks. Some people kind of started at different spots, but they're like, I'm like, okay, girls, like this is what we're going after this week. We're like going to deload our volume. We're going to deload a little bit with our strength training. And they're like, what? Like, I've never done this before. Or this is typically, like, one of the gals was literally like, this is typically the point in the program where I would say, okay, I'm back to lifting heavier weight. I'm back to running more consistently. I'm actually just going to go more. Like, I'm going to lift heavier and I'm going to add another day in of running. And I'm like, yeah, we're actually going to not do that. We're going to do less. You're going to recover and then you're going to go into it higher. And it's just cool, like as we're kind of going over like maybe some of like the biofeedback where it's like, are you feeling more fatigued? They're like, yeah. Or are you feeling more like run down with running? Yeah. Like these are great signs to like pull back and then be able to progress a little bit more. So that's so cool that you touched on that. I think another like big thing that I see with my clients is I like to prescribe their strength training, at least in the beginning, like as you said, starting where they're at. If we're using dumbbells or bands or barbells or whatever, I like to prescribe based off of like rate of perceived effort or rate of perceived exertion. So I'm like, okay, Sally, we're doing like an endurance-based exercise. We're going to go for 3 sets of like 15 to 20. You should feel this at like a 6 out of 10 RPE. And then maybe we progress to strength training. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna start at like 3 sets of 12. Like and we're gonna see what that feels like at like a 7 to 8 out of 10 RPE. And the gals are like, this, like, what is RPE? Like, what does this feel like? So I'm curious for you, like, as you're kind of maybe teaching women like how to get in the gym, how to lift the appropriate weight, like what are some of the cues that you're giving them to be like, this is when you know that like you are hitting the appropriate weight, or this is how you kind of build up to that.
Yeah, RPE is such a great scale to orient yourself on. I do actually encourage people to also not be afraid of literally taking things to failure as long as it's safe for sure, just so that you have more of a reference range because the studies are really clear that we tend to underestimate how close to failure we actually are, or no, actually overestimate, sorry, apologies. So what I mean by that is like if you tell someone, okay, I want you to push really hard and by the end of this set, where would you say, like, how far away from failure were you? And they like, oh, like 1 or 2, and then they get another go at this exact same weight and they're like, okay, push it to failure now, and they would have actually gotten another 6 reps out. So their own estimation is like actually quite far off, 1 or 2 and 6, that's quite the difference. So because of that, I do often say like, hey, yes, we want to make sure we're doing build up sets. So not just like, oh, I'm gonna do back squats today. Last week I did 80 pounds. So today I'm starting off with 80 pounds. No, I always want someone to start maybe just empty, well, of course, body weight squat, empty barbell, and then putting on slowly, slowly progressing on the with the weight. And when you feel like it's getting challenging, like slowly thinking about what working weight am I actually going to use? But yeah, every now and then, or especially with things like leg press or, where it's really safe to go to failure, have that first working set actually be like with the intention of like, this is going to be either really close to failure or to failure. So once you know that, then okay, I guess 110 pounds was my failure for this amount of reps that I was supposed to do. I'm actually just supposed to be at like a 9 RP or 8 RP, so I'm going to strip it down to 100 pounds. So I think people should not be afraid to go to failure in order to know better what could be something like a certain weight on the RPE scale, a 9 or an 8 to have a better reference range there.
Yes, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so funny. Like, in my program, we often transition from like, okay, maybe more endurance-based things to work on form of exercise and then progress into like true strength training. And I'm like, okay, like this week you're gonna do, 3 sets of 8 to 12 at 7 to 8 out of 10 rate of perceived effort. And they're like, well, what weight do you think I should grab? Like maybe like a 10? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I want you to actually go heavier. Like it depending on safety, of course, but I'm like,
Sure.
what if you actually try out a little bit heavier than you anticipated and then got to really see what that felt like? Maybe you get to 5 to 6 reps and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is really challenging. Then you can kind of know from there if you need
For
to
sure.
go up or
And I'm
down.
sure you use the same principle when it comes to running. Also, let's say if someone their personal best for 10 kilometers or whatever is X, and in their training program in the following weeks or whatever, it's going to say run at 80% of your 10K max. They only know what the 80% is if they have done their max effort or their best time beforehand, and the same applies to training. Of course, if you're starting completely from scratch, that's a different story. You're probably going to make progress no matter what if you're starting from scratch with strength training anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So true. And two, I love like with the RPE scale of like how it can vary from day to day, like especially
Mhm.
as women where our hormones are not on like a 24-hour cycle. It's like there are some weeks where you're just like, I am completely gassed, and I normally do 30 pounds for my, I don't know, hip thrust or whatever. And this like I can only squeak out 8 reps, and I used to be able to squeak out 10. And it's just cool that it like kind of ebbs and flows with them, as opposed to being like, you have to do 30 pounds, and that's the only thing that's acceptable.
No, auto regulation is so great, such a good tool. And like you said, like just learning what works best for you in your cycle as well. Because I think there was a time where everyone was like talking about cycle syncing and we always need to deload around our PMS week. And then, you need to push for your personal best around your ovulation. And it's like, this really doesn't apply to everybody out there. Some women are not experiencing any symptoms at all. They can
Mhm.
push just as hard in their PMS or in the week before their period or on their period. And others, they're like laying in bed and can hardly move. Like you cannot
Yeah.
tell them, oh, you still need to get your training. And like it is so personal, person dependent. And also, even within that person, I have seen that, and I know for myself, some months I'm feeling completely fine on my period, and other months I'm like, ugh, yeah, I'm just gonna go for a walk today. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Yes. It's so person dependent, which is just it's crazy. But yes, that's so cool. To just have these training parameters, I think is just really awesome, both with strength training and also like on the nutrition side, just to have some like parameters and things to think about, I think are incredible. I've had so much fun with our conversation today. It's been so fun to just get to hear your perspective on like something that you just literally do and teach day in and day out. If people are curious about getting to know you more, working with you, like following you, what are like some of the key places that you're putting information out there and chatting with people?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I too enjoyed our conversation. And as I said, my the business name is Nutrition Coaching and Life. So I'm rather active on Instagram and on YouTube as well with my podcast. I also am on LinkedIn, and the podcast name is the Nutrition and Life Podcast. And yeah, if you're listening to this and you're enjoying the conversation, I'd love it if you leave me a message or whatever, just saying, hey, I listened to you and Sarah. And again, I want to just encourage people to not be afraid of tracking their food intake for some time, not even with a specific goal of like, oh, I need to hit XYZ calories, but literally just out of curiosity, like how much am I actually eating? Just to get a gauge for what calories are you currently taking in. And number two, the other takeaway I do want to give people is like paying attention to their protein intake, not just when they're recovering from injury, but also recovering from their day-to-day training. And then number three, I wanted to say, I think it's awesome that you're encouraging people to eat more of an anti-inflammatory diet. I think that's absolutely incredible for their recovery as well. But there's also nothing wrong with, let's say, supplementing with omega-3s or higher dose vitamin C when you need it, especially as you guys are heading into winter as well. Just paying more attention to those micronutrients can often make the difference into like how often are you going to get sick throughout the winter or not. So, yeah, but thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, thanks so much for being on. I'll be sure to link your website, socials, all the stuff in the podcast description so people can easily find you. But thanks again so much for coming on, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.